Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Stefanie Drysdale's weekly cybersecurity recap, number 32 for August 14th, 2020. Stefanie Drysdale, VP of Cyber, Prescient.com. Welcome, Stefanie.
Thank you, Chuck. How are you?
Doing well as we slug along here, finishing up 2020. We're getting into the home stretch. And, things are still not great in the cyber world. So tell us what's going on.
Yeah, it's a busy week for the cyber world. I'll just jump right in this week. Troll's Erding shared an article that featured him in the Wall Street Journal that was about how the pandemic has elevated security chiefs to corporate leadership roles. Really unfortunate, obviously, that crime isn't diminishing, but really fortunate that we have incredibly talented security and cybersecurity pros and executives that bring that expertise to scale to help them grow their businesses and everything while still protecting them. Really important. This is elevating that role to a really great degree, and love to see the increased value for those people in those roles. So excellent news on that front. CISO Online shared the top 8 weirdest, meanest, dumbest hacks of all time. Really, really entertaining. I especially liked the casino fish tank hack we all heard about a while back. It just really shows how one vulnerable point of entry can really wreak havoc on an otherwise, protected network and ultimately be quite catastrophic. So make sure that you're doing those tests and you're knowing what devices are plugged into your network, especially when we're all working from a remote model. Everything from that cute little Alexa device plugged into your wall can potentially leave work information vulnerable. So make sure you know what's plugged in and how it can be hacked. Gideon Rasmussen shared a Forbes article on why you should stop sending SMS messages even on Apple iMessage. Apple iMessage uses an end-to-end encryption, but one thing that you might not know is there's a setting within iMessage that allows you to revert to regular SMS if perhaps you can't reach the network. This will actually take you off of the encryption setting and then leave it like a regular text message. Text messages are stored on the server of your provider rather than end-to-end encryption basically being only stored on the 2 devices that are communicating. So really, really helpful to know and important that if you think you're using end-to-end encryption, that there isn't some type of revert in the settings that would take that away and ultimately leave the information vulnerable to being viewed by a third party or ultimately being peeled during a breach. Todd Fitzgerald shared a CNET article on patient private information and the compromised aspect of those through some pagers and internal radios being able to be, in some situations, 70 miles away. This is really another vulnerability point that we're seeing, that when you have sensitive information, private healthcare information in addition, those are hefty, hefty fines. So if you are tasked with protecting a healthcare center or any type of patient data like that, you really ultimately have to be incredibly thorough in mapping your data, how it's transmitted, how it's stored, whether it's encrypted, all of that. Really important points. Obviously, organizations like mine are happy to help, but make sure that you are protecting that data. Really, really important. This week, my own Patrick Murphy, head of investigations here at Prescient, was featured in a Maestro Vision article called The 11 Interrogation Experts' Tips to Improve Your Investigations. Pat's a great interviewer and investigator. He talked about having his questions written out in advance, but letting your interviewee talk freely, also helping them feel comfortable enough to open up. He's one of the best, and there were a lot of great tips in this article, so make sure that you catch that. Don Ray shared a Worth.com article on the 7 biggest threats facing high net worth families today. Number 1, shocking, cybersecurity, followed closely by physical and travel security. Some other really great tips. It was important, I think, that they were all addressed within this, but as technology evolves and criminals get more and more creative, it's really important that you evolve your security team to include other capabilities and other situations that you would have a greater awareness for different threats that you might not even know that your principal might encounter. Steve Morgan shared Cybersecurity Ventures trends on recruiting, compensation, turnover, military backgrounds, and more. This is a great sampling of Fortune 500 and global CISOs that really talks about the way the industry is moving, especially during a pandemic. There are different roles that are becoming more and more important now. And the CISO is absolutely one of those roles that is a must-have, whether it be externally or internally, or at least from a guidance perspective. So if you have any device, if you have any information on your network, you need to be aware of it. So this is a really great study and report to kind of let you know where those trends are going and things that perhaps, if they aren't already, definitely need to be on your radar. Cindy Otis was featured in a Washington Post article that that exposed a Florida man for peddling disinformation for profit, as well as other get-rich-quick schemes. And we always talk about disinformation, misinformation. Obviously, the difference between the two is mis would be inadvertent, dis is intentional. There are people who are capitalizing on this, and we're in a political year where we're going into an election. So make sure that you're very, very hesitant to believe everything you read. You check your sources, and when in doubt, just don't spend your money on some strange, token or coin that is for your political party. If you don't know who is behind it, who's getting the money, where your private information is going, just always retain that degree of caution. The National Cybersecurity Center in the UK published a step-by-step guide to recovering a hacked account. They had things that were really updating your device and contacting the provider, as well as changing passwords and enabling two-factor authentication. Really good, handy reference sheet for all this. Obviously, it can get more detailed than that, but always kind of know what you're supposed to do in the event that something should go wrong and how you want to handle it when that unfortunate event might happen. Tech Republic shared some reports conducted by some white hat pen testers that basically said that 3 out of 4 companies could easily be breached by an unskilled hacker. This is not the news we want to hear by any means. We'd like to think that only, a nation state actor could get into, our systems and that they're just that tough. But the reality is it doesn't take a lot of skill to get into most of them. 7% of systems were adequate enough to withstand any breaches, only 7. Outside of that, 25% of them were hacked with just 1 step. 43% were hacked within just 2 steps, and 25% in 3 to 6 steps. So those aren't a lot of, it's not a lot of complexity that's required to get into most networks. Definitely make sure that you're having those pen tests conducted regularly, that your systems are patched and updated frequently, and that you know where your sensitive data is and that it is encrypted. That's incredibly helpful. Again, make sure that you have a resource. Prescient is happy to be that resource, but if it isn't your resource, please get one. Really important to make sure that your data is protected, as well as from a client or a compliance standpoint, that you're not being faced with some pretty hefty fines for not protecting that data. So that's what I have for you all this week. Thank you all for the great interaction on some of the really wonderful posts that we had talking about training within the industry and all of those things. And thank you also for some really lovely happy birthday wishes this week. So I appreciate that. Everyone have a wonderful weekend, and I will look forward to seeing you next week.